Hey everybody, it's been forever since I've done a video, so once again, bear with me with all of the uhs that I'm most likely going to say. There you go. I've been thinking a lot lately about when the Bible talks about everything that Satan intends for evil, God intends for good. And I've been looking, at situations in my life where things that look really, really bad end up being a blessing, and not all of the things have turned out to be blessings that I'm aware of, but I just put my trust in the Lord that He's going to use those things to bless me or to bless somebody else. So I've been feeling recently like I need to share kind of a large portion of my testimony, and a lot of it, people that know me, on Facebook and things, especially in my family and friends, have gone through most of this with me already, with my daughter. But I'm going to start at the beginning where I feel like the Lord was really just kind of sweeping over our lives as a family and moving us around to where He wanted us to be for obvious reasons later. But my husband, we were living in Yakima, Washington, and my husband had been at the same job for, I want to say like 8 years or something. He'd been there a long time. His best friend's family owned the company. And he was supervisor of his crew, at his job. And I'm going to try to say this as quickly as possible, make it short, but he was in charge of his crew, and there was not much work at the time. And my husband is a very hard worker, and if you're working with him, you better work hard or he's going to get you, And so even though there wasn't a lot of work at the time, he would, push his guys to give 100%, and they would get done early and like go golf or whatever. And there were other groups of people in the company that were milking the work and getting overtime, which essentially is stealing. And they got a new floor supervisor, and this guy was unaware of the situation and wanted my husband's crew to stay after because they were done early to help these other groups with their work. And so my husband's guys were clearly not happy. Here they're being pushed to work 100%, get done, and they know these guys are basically stealing from the company. So, my husband comes to me, and it's the whole, old school snitches get stitches, and you don't rat, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, look, babe, you are a supervisor. You are responsible for this crew. It's your job to bring, whatever, issues they have, to the owner. That's your job. You put your neck out. It's uncomfortable, but your guys aren't happy, and you got to look out for your guys. And so, that was the advice that I gave him. And he went and, let them know. And there was kind of I think 3 brothers own the company. And he told the one brother who, who was happy to hear about the situation. And the next day, a different brother came and fired my husband. So I was, of course, like super guilty, feeling guilty because I gave him this advice, and I did it prayerfully. It was like, oh, shoot, so what are we going to do? We had this new blended family. We were trying to create a stable environment for the children in the house that weren't necessarily used to stability. And so, together we discussed that I should be home. And so I was home with, at the time, the 4 kids. And, Mike was the sole breadwinner. So, how are we going to pay the mortgage and all that? With the economy, I'm sure plenty of people, can understand how that feels. So he was looking for work everywhere. My husband was looking for work online, in the papers. He went down to like Job Source, putting applications in like everywhere. There were no jobs in Yakima. And he, for a little while, drove delivering hay, but the money wasn't really there, and he wasn't there with the kids. And so he stopped doing that and started trying to do a construction company. And this was in 2008. And so everybody knows that's a horrible time to start a construction company. But he's always loved things to do with houses. Anyway, didn't work out. And we were stressing. We weren't sure what we were going to do, and I was looking at maybe going back to work and paying daycare for 4 kids, and it was like, well, it wasn't going to make much money, if I did that, and we just weren't sure what we were going to do. And We were a couple months behind on our mortgage. It was like we're looking at foreclosure, and it wasn't for lack of looking for work. So we didn't know what we were going to do. And we're like, laying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what's going to happen. And I remember seeing my husband just staring at the ceiling, and this kind of a peace came over me. And I said, I really feel like the Lord is going to open a door that we normally wouldn't go through if we weren't going through this. And sure enough, he got a call from his brother who was already living in Arizona, and said, they were looking for a press brake operator, which is what my husband does and has done for like ever. And the company wanted to fly him down to see if it would work, if they liked each other, And so they flew him down in October of 2008. And sure enough, my husband's awesome and they love him. And so they wanted to hire him. So that left me at home to try to sell our house and try to figure out all of the custody issues that would go with, moving children out of state. So I was really stressing about the selling of the house. I didn't know a thing about it. I was so afraid of doing something wrong, and I was like, okay, I don't know how to pick a realtor or anything. I'm just gonna stick a sign up in the front yard. And I wrote my phone number on a sign and stuck it in the front yard, and it was a matter of days. I don't even remember how many days it was, but I got a knock on the door, and this little woman, her name was Minchin, and she was so cute, and she just said she'd always loved the house and she could see the mountain, and she made an offer that day. So I was so blessed by that, because I was so out of my element trying to sell a house. I mean, I knew nothing about that. So that was a huge blessing. In the meantime, my husband flew up for Thanksgiving and for Christmas, got the house packed up. When he came home for Christmas, he got a U-Haul, took all of our stuff and drove it down to Arizona. And we went to stay with his grandmother while we waited for the custody battle, issues, which it was a battle, to go through and get finalized so that I could, move. So eventually, after a long drawn-out battle, we got permission to leave the state to move our family so we could be back together. So, we ended up coming back down here in January of 2009. And a lot of you already know about my daughter. People on YouTube that don't know me personally don't. But my daughter Clara was 2 years old. She had gone up to Washington to visit with my husband's grandparents, and my mother-in-law Dee flew her back down. And when she came back, this was November of 2009, her right eye was reflecting funny. And when I say funny, it's if you shine a light like a cat, you can see how it's not like a person's eye. A person's eye kind of reflects red, and a cat looks, I don't know, you can just it reflects funny. So her right eye looked funny. And so I called my husband in and I said, come and look at this eye. It looks funny. And he was like, I want you to take her to urgent care right now. So it was 8:00 at night. So Dee and I, took her to urgent care. And they said that they thought it was neurological, and that we should take her to the ER. So we came back home, dropped off Dee, got my husband, and we drove to the ER and stayed for 7 hours. It was overrun with children that obviously had the flu. And this was in the midst of the swine flu epidemic. It was we're going to get the flu before my daughter gets seen. So we, went back home. And the next morning I thought, what is wrong with me? What am I thinking? There's something wrong with my daughter's eye. My brother and my sister-in-law live in Arizona. They're, 45, an hour away roughly. And my sister-in-law Joanna works in a retinal clinic. It didn't even compute to think to call her to see what she thought. So I called her and she said, first take her to the optometrist at Walmart, and it might be just an infection. She might need some eye drops or something. So I said, okay. So I took her the next day. She was home on a Sunday or Monday. I think it was Sunday. Monday, went to the optometrist. And the poor optometrist at the Walmart, he looks at me and he looks down at his hands after looking at Clara, and he looks at me again and he says, there's no easy way to say this. And I said, just say it. And he said, we need her to go to a pediatric ophthalmologist so that we can rule out cancer. And he started, talking, and, of course you hear like the ocean in your head. He hears the word cancer and what, and he refused to let me pay for the appointment. And I left the Walmart holding my daughter and barely holding it together. I got home, started to make her lunch, called my sister-in-law Joanna, and just started bawling and was like, they're thinking it's this retinoblastoma cancer. Like, I don't even know what that is. And Joanna said, okay, I want her to see my guy. And I can tell you right now, my husband losing his job, us moving out of a state, like all the court battles, everything was solely for me to be here for this with my daughter. Because if Joanna hadn't been here, I'm sure everybody can understand how hard it is to get referrals from doctors, from one referral to the next doctor, and you have to go back to your main doctor before you get one referral, and then that person can't refer. It's a huge mess, and Joanna took care of everything. She was like, okay, I want her to see my guy. Come in right now. We'll make time for you. Just start driving. So I called Mike, and I'm bawling, and I'm like, they're saying she might have cancer, and he's like, just calm down, baby. Come and get me, and we'll take her in. So we drove and, got Mike, and we're driving to this place, and all I can think of is there's no way my daughter has cancer. There is no way that my daughter has cancer. God will not do this to me. In the 6th grade, there was a boy that had cancer in my class, and I had the hugest crush on this little boy. And our whole class was really, and the whole school really, is a small town in Sequim, was really involved with really trying to support him and his family. And really, every week we would read his blood counts in class, and our teacher would explain what that meant, and he lost his life, I think it was 2 years later, to leukemia. And ever since then, I had prayed diligently over my unborn children that they would never have cancer. Like, I prayed that my whole childhood into adulthood. And so if I had to wage bets about whether or not any of my children would get cancer, I would have bet everything that I had. I was that confident that my children would never have to deal with this. And so driving to this, to Joanna's work, to this, I can't even think of the word. What's the word? The eye doctor. I can't think of which one. There's a lot of eye doctors we have to see, and I can't remember which one I'm talking about. So go to this retinal clinic, and Clara will not cooperate. The doctor can't look in her eyes. She won't have anything to do with it. He's like, this isn't going to work. She needs to see a pediatric ophthalmologist. And that's the word. And he's like, they're better with dealing with kids and everything. So I said, okay, and he was like, I'll talk to the people out front, and it might be a couple weeks and all this stuff, and just was really just kind of chill about it. And I said, okay, went home and said, I feel so much better. He couldn't look at her eye. She was throwing a fit, but he wasn't rushed, so it's probably nothing. It's probably fine. So a couple weeks, I'm expecting to get a call. I get a call the next day. It was Wednesday, from a pediatric ophthalmologist that wanted me to get Clara in immediately. So then, of course, there goes my hope that it's not a big deal. I call my mother-in-law, Mona, who was gracious enough to drive me all over the place, because at this point I didn't know where anything lived. And people that know me know that, like, my hugest fear is driving places where I don't know where I'm going, on highways with my kids in the car. Like, I'm a total basket case. It's ridiculous, but it's something I can't shake. So she was awesome and drove me, to Phoenix Children's, I think it was. No, we went to the ophthalmologist clinic first, and she took one look at her and said, we need to get her over to Phoenix and get, MRI and all this stuff. So I call my husband, like, okay, they want to do this and that, and we go over to the hospital, get her checked in. So Clara, Clara had fluid on a Monday, went to the retinal clinic with my sister-in-law on Tuesday. Wednesday, we went to the pediatric ophthalmologist and the hospital, and we had to get the MRI to see what was going on. So it was late at night. This young doctor comes out after Clara had, been put, to sleep with little anesthesia so she would hold still for the MRI and all this, and, pulls us into the room and says, your daughter has retinoblastoma. It's what we feared. And they had told me that if that was what it was, they were going to have to, remove her eye, and she'd have to go through chemo. And I can't even explain how it feels to hear somebody tell you something like that about your kid. I mean, even though you know it's a possibility, even though you know that's what you're there for, to find out if that's what you're, up against, it was ridiculous. It was like, this can't possibly be happening. Like, I had this covered. I've been praying my whole life against this. This can't possibly be happening. I've had this covered, And so I just held her and bawled hysterically for like 10 seconds. I had to suck it up. I'm holding my kid, my husband, my mother-in-law's there. I just was hysterical for, 10 seconds. And then I sucked it up, and it was like, okay, what do we do? So she ended up, getting her eye removed, getting surgery to have a port put into her chest so that when she went to get her chemo, they could administer fluids and things and the chemo into her chest, because I guess it's so poisonous, the veins in the arms would have a hard time with it. It was my understanding. She had 6 months of chemo, lost her hair. A lot of you, friends and family, went through this with me. I mean, I kept you updated as to how, her condition was and all of that. And, at the beginning of this, I mean, I would cry for like 10 seconds and then stop. Like, I couldn't let myself really think about what was happening to my kid. Because I just knew if I started crying, I just wasn't going to stop. And I remember one night, like, it was just before Christmas. Clara had gotten her first chemo at that point. And I was laying in bed with my husband, and I just kind of started crying. And I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. I went outside. I told him, I said, baby, I'm so sorry. I have to just do this for a while, apparently, because I can't make it stop, He was like, well, you've been really strong, and I've been waiting for you to break, and I figured it was coming, so, what can I do? I said, I just, need to be alone. I'm going to go, outside. And I, ridiculously enough, smoked a lot of cigarettes outside and bawled hysterically. I mean, it's ridiculous to be smoking your kid's fighting cancer, but I did, and, judge away if you'd like. But that's what I did. I went outside and smoked and bawled my eyes out, and I literally stood in my yard with my fist in the air, shaking my fist at God, which is ridiculous. I mean, if you picture me up there like shaking my fist, but I was. It was like, how could this be happening? On top of all of this, we'd been looking for a house to buy and going through all of these hoops, and we found the house that we wanted after months and months of looking. And the house we had sold in Washington was a wraparound loan, so essentially they would give us a chunk of money at the beginning, sign all the paperwork, and later there would be a balloon payment, and at that point we would completely sign off of the whatever title deed, whatever, and then be free and clear. Well, in Arizona, the underwriter didn't like the fact that we had this house and we were still on title, because if those people didn't pay it, we would be responsible for that house payment. So they didn't like that. So we were having a hard time getting the okay for the loan to buy the house that we'd been looking at. It was like, at this point, I don't care if I live in a box. Like, I'm too busy dealing with my kid. I can't do this anymore. This is too much. I don't even care about this house situation. And my husband's dad and stepmom were like, Claire needs a house to live. You guys don't need to worry about this. So they just co-signed with us to just be over and done with it, which was so awesome, for them to do that, because this has been such a blessing. Because, I mean, where we were living in the rental before, there's no bus system to this school. It was like a mile away, and it made me really nervous with the kids. And the house we live in now, there's like a little park right back. I mean, I can hear the intercom from the school in my front yard. So they're super close. And it was a huge help to be able to move, that much closer to the school for the kids, because we ended up having to go rush Clara back to the hospital, days after her chemo. We'd get her home and she'd have spiking a fever. And like, I don't even know how many times was flying down the freeway, driving with one hand, holding a puke bucket over my shoulder, for the baby because she couldn't hold it. And poor thing, and I just, now looking back and being done, she's cancer free. She's got her prosthesis, her little eyelid's a little bit droopy still, and we'll end up getting surgery to get that lifted, but she's healthy. She's happy. She's obnoxious and and crazy and running all over the place, and, looking back and going through this, it was like, we experienced typically what people say will wreck marriages. I remember watching, it was like reading some story, some like, I don't know, quiz thing about like things that will generally be the demise of a marriage. And it was like, what was it? Unexpected pregnancy, loss of a job, new job, moving out of state, court battles, and death in a family. I think was the other one, or not death in a family, illness, like a huge medical illness. It was like looking back after, Clara's last chemo, knowing she was healthy and her little bald head's got little, fresh hair sprouting and everything's looking pretty good. I look back and I was like, we've had every single one of these trials hit our marriage. And we're good, what a huge blessing. We've gone through all of these things and it never once shook my marriage, it brought us closer together. And I firmly believe that we were moved here specifically for, Clara's life. Dr. Leverant, Clara's ophthalmologist, she is the surgeon who diagnosed Clara. She is the surgeon who removed Clara's eye. She is the surgeon who they essentially, with your brain, you've got an optic nerve that connects to the eyeball, and that there's a lot of blood flow going through there. So they pull the eye out of the socket and snip that optic nerve, to the brain, and the back of the eyeball has finger-like muscles, like the back of a cabbage, and they peeled those back and cut the eyeball out, and they were able to take a coral orb, like a circle of coral from the ocean, and they sutured those muscles back to Clara's, this like fake eyeball essentially, and then like wrapped the mucosa back around it. And so she has minimal tracking with it, and it's amazing because when you look at pictures of Clara, you can actually see the cancer. Like, it starts in like little seeds at the back of the eyeball, and it manifests in different physical ways, with different kids. But with Clara, you could see the bottom of her eye, the colored part. I think so. Is that the iris? Sorry, Joanna. The iris, I think, had turned white because the white blood cells were like attacking the cancer up in front. You could see it when you looked at her eye, and the doctors had said, we don't know how extensive this is going to be. There's a lot of blood flow between the eye and the brain. And if the cancer has sent cells to the brain, we're looking at a huge chemo battle here. And when they went to do the surgery, Dr. Leverett came out to let us know it went well, and that the cancer was just starting to eat into the lamina, which was like this like sheath between the eye and all of that blood flow back and forth to the brain. So if that had gotten there, we would have had a chance. There was a chance that it could have been spread throughout her entire body, at that point. And if it wasn't for the fact that we had moved here, if it wasn't for the fact that Joanna worked in a retinal clinic and was able to push us through all of those hoops with insurance, there's a good possibility, in my opinion, in my soul, that my daughter wouldn't be here today. So my God divinely, placed my sister and brother here before us, my brother-in-law Scott here before us, so that we would be here when we needed to be here. And I am so grateful for that. And looking back, the Lord really carried us through that whole period of time with Clara's illness, and she was such a trooper. I mean, she lived off chocolate milk and bacon and buttered popcorn. That was like all she wanted to eat. So we're still fighting to get her to eat, better food now. But she's in kindergarten now. Her hair's almost down to her waist. She's a happy little kid, and the surgeon that worked on her, Dr. Leverant, is like well known. I mean, we've met people that have moved here from the Philippines specifically to have their children who are diagnosed with this see her. Like, she is amazing. And it's so funny because Clara couldn't pronounce Leverett when she was little, so we just called her Dr. Amy. And you take Clara to the park, and little kids want to know and look at her and, what happened to your eye? And she says, I had cancer in it, and Dr. Amy saved my life, And so, and I believe that she did, and I believe that my husband lost that job. We were stressing over money. We were stressing about losing our house, all because if it hadn't been that hard, we never would have wanted to fight court battles. It wasn't our desire to take our children from their other parents, but it was a door that was the only door that was open, really. I mean, we never would have come here, and not just that. I think there's a good possibility if we'd been in Yakima when Clara was diagnosed. I mean, what if I'd had to go over Snoqualmie Pass all the way to Seattle Children's Hospital to get chemo in the middle of winter when it's snowing and frozen and half the time the roads are closed and I'm holding a puke bucket over my shoulder? Like, I mean, it was a straight shot from here to the hospital where Clara got her chemo, and the nurses were awesome, the staff was awesome, everybody was awesome, and I'm just grateful, and at that time, laying in that bed with my husband, looking at the ceiling going, what is God doing? How is this a blessing? And my husband kept saying, I did the right thing. You told me this was the right thing, and we thought about it, we prayed about it. I did the right thing. Why am I being punished? And it was so hard to look at that situation going, we're doing what we feel God wants us to do. My husband needed to stand up for his crew. Well, now he's in charge of a much larger crew at a job where he is entirely appreciated. And he's happy. I mean, it's the best job he's ever had. He loves it there. He loves his boss. He loves everybody there. So, I mean, he's really happy. He's being fulfilled with his work, and my kids are happy. I mean, they miss their other parents. They have to go home to visit them in the summer and other stuff. Isaac goes up a little more often because the kids have different parenting plans. But overall, we're here, we're together, we're all alive, and I'm just so grateful for it. And looking back, there were so many different things that, I mean, I wouldn't have been grateful for my husband losing that job. And right now there's a lot of people that are out of jobs and are struggling. And again, I mean, the Bible says everything Satan intends for evil, God intends for good. My husband lost that job so my daughter could live. That's the way that I see it, plain and simple. Now, looking at that, I kind of go, okay, how do you thank the Lord for your daughter getting cancer? I don't know. I'm kind of praying he might heal her eye. Like, what an awesome testimony that would be. Let's give her a new eyeball, Lord. He can handle it. But I don't know. I don't know what God's plan is and why he did that. I just have to give thanks that my daughter is alive, and give thanks that he provided for us and that he got us through that. I mean, looking back, it shouldn't have been as easy as it was, and it wasn't easy going through it, but that breaks marriages, that breaks households, that breaks homes, and we are all still in this thing together, so he got us through it. But I just want to encourage friends, family, strangers, when things are going wrong in your life, God can bless you through that. And it's really hard to say thank you for the circumstances that I'm in, but it's a matter of instead saying, I have faith that you are going to bless me because of this. God is refining you in the fire, for his glory. And when you look back, and I'm sure whether you are a Christian or not, you could look back at your life and go, wow, when that happened, that really sucked. But now you can see the blessings for it. It's that Garth Brooks song, Unanswered Prayers. Why things don't turn out the way you desperately want them to is generally because he has a better plan for you than you have for you. And thankfully for that, because I can think of all the different things that I've prayed for in the past, and none of those things, if I had gotten them, would have led me to where I am now. So anyways, this is a longer video than I usually would do, long-winded with a lot of ums in the middle, but I just wanted to share with you a situation where I didn't know what I was going to do. We didn't know what we were going to do. We didn't know why we were there, but the Lord blessed us abundantly as we trusted him. So anyway, God bless all of you, friends, family. I love you guys. I may come off a little strong about my Jesus at times, but it's because I love him and I desperately love you. And it's always coming from a place of love for you when I bring up my Jesus, So I love all of you guys, and be safe, be happy, and we'll talk to you later.